Hey there, welcome back. This is Austin, and this is Animal Quests. Today, we're breaking down some of the dumbest safari decisions ever, and what happened when the animals responded. From a safety auditor approaching a musk elephant, to a photographer leaning too far over a boat near a Nile crocodile. Let's start with a corporate professional who ignored her guide and stepped out of the vehicle, while a dominant male lion was already watching. It was May 13, 2026, just past 7 in the morning on a private reserve in South Africa's Lowveld. The savanna had opened into a flat clearing of short grass and scattered brush, still cool under the early light. Visibility stretched for hundreds of yards in every direction. The kind of morning that looks completely manageable. Still air, good light, nothing moving. The kind of morning that makes people feel more comfortable than they should. Callitrix Vaughn, 39, weighed 386 pounds and worked as a senior HR manager at a logistics firm. Colleagues described her as self-assured and occasionally dismissive of precautions she considered unnecessary outside her professional lane. The safari was a premium package, booked after a demanding work cycle, her first guided bush experience. At the initial briefing, the guide outlined one non-negotiable rule. No one exits the vehicle at any time unless explicitly told to. Callitrix pushed back during the briefing itself, describing the restriction as overstated. The guide held the position without negotiation and moved on. On the first day, a pattern formed. She repeatedly raised herself above the door line to improve her camera angle, each time complying when corrected by the guide, then resuming the behavior within minutes. The guide had to redirect her several times before the vehicle had even reached its second stop of the morning. Other passengers noticed. The guide noticed. The pattern was repetitive enough that it had already been established well before the vehicle entered the clearing where it mattered most. Ironically, people learn the rule, agree to it, then act like it doesn't apply to them. That is not forgetting. It's a choice they keep making, each time a little easier. Just after 7 a.m., the vehicle stopped in a clearing where a coalition of 2 adult male lions rested approximately 40 feet off the track. The engine stayed idling. The guide instructed all passengers to remain seated and fully inside the vehicle. Other passengers lowered their profiles without hesitation. One male lay partially upright, head raised, ears pushed forward, tail moving in slow and irregular sweeps across the grass, holding direct visual contact with the vehicle. The second male remained further back, largely still, minimally engaged with what was happening. The guide stayed still in the vehicle and continued monitoring the alert male's behavior. African lions are apex predators capable of reaching close to 50 miles per hour in short bursts. From 40 feet, a lion at full acceleration covers that distance in roughly a second. A dominant coalition male already visually locked onto a nearby object is actively processing every variable of the encounter: distance, movement, silhouette, and any change in the structure of what it is watching. Any disruption to the vehicle's continuous silhouette, particularly at ground level, registers immediately as a change in the threat dynamic. At roughly 420 pounds with a frame built for explosive short-range pursuit, a mature male does not require distance to be dangerous. It requires only a trigger. At 7:04 a.m., Callitrix opened the side door and placed one foot on the ground, bracing against the frame to gain an unobstructed camera angle. The vehicle's silhouette broke at ground level. The alert male rose from its position and covered several feet in a short, direct rush, closing the gap before pausing for a fraction of a second at close range. It's unclear if that pause was the animal thinking or just shifting position. What followed was immediate contact at the upper body and neck region, consistent with the kind of force and targeting that occurs when a large predator commits at close range. The open door had disrupted the guide's maneuvering angle, and by the time the vehicle began to move, the distance was already gone. The second male did not join the interaction. The guide accelerated forward while sounding the horn continuously. The lion disengaged after several seconds and retreated into the brush, moving in a low, unhurried line back toward the tree line. Response staff were radioed immediately. Passengers were relocated inside the vehicle and moved away, while emergency crews were called to the scene. Response staff arrived within minutes. The injuries were non-survivable. A formal review concluded that the lion's response was consistent with a predatory-style strike triggered by sudden exposure at close range. No action was taken against either animal. The review noted that the animal's behavior fell entirely within normal parameters for the species under those conditions. The finding placed the sequence of events squarely on the decision made at 7:04 a.m. The reserve handled the review internally, and video footage captured by other passengers on the vehicle was submitted to investigators. The footage was withheld from public release at the request of the reviewing authority and the victim's family. After all, she had been warned before by her guide. She knew what the law said but could not stand it. Besides this, with the fierce lion already looking at her, she faced an even more dangerous threat. Callitrix ignored every signal the situation offered. the animal's posture, the guide's repeated corrections, and her own established pattern of behavior in the hours before. The next story involves a man who built his entire career enforcing safety protocols for other people, and still stepped off a vehicle when the most dangerous animal in the clearing gave him every reason not to. It was June 14th, 2015, mid-morning on a private reserve in South Africa's Limpopo province. The bush was dense along the perimeter roads, broken by open stretches of mopane woodland. The air was already warming fast, the kind of terrain where something large can stand completely still and disappear against the background until you are far too close. Alaric Voss, 44, was a German industrial safety auditor. His professional life was built around identifying risk, flagging violations, and enforcing protocols in high-stakes industrial environments. Outside of work, Alaric dismissed restrictions in recreational settings and found guided safaris unnecessarily rigid. He had little patience for local rangers. He didn't consider his peers. What amuses me is how someone can seem so professional, yet completely ignore basic judgment. He was trained to assess risk, but the moment the warning came from someone he didn't respect, he just ignored it. During a morning game drive, the group encountered a solitary bull elephant about 55 yards from the track. The ranger stopped with the engine running and identified it as a must bull, pointing out the signs: dark temporal gland secretions, a low forward-leaning head, and uneven ear movement. The elephant was already aware of them, partially facing the vehicle. The ranger maintained a safe distance and clearly warned that bulls in must can be very unpredictable and dangerous. Alaric dismissed the warning, assuming it was exaggerated. Frustrated by the distance, he edged toward the side of the vehicle. When the ranger briefly looked away to scan the bush, Alaric quietly stepped down without permission and lifted his camera toward the elephant. A bull African elephant in must operates with testosterone levels up to 60 times its normal baseline. The temporal secretion visible on this animal was a direct physiological indicator of that hormonal state. Adult males weigh between 10,000 and 13,000 pounds and are capable of reaching 15 miles per hour within just a few strides. A must bull that is already partially oriented toward a perceived disturbance requires almost no transition time between alert posture and a committed charge. The elephant locked onto the movement immediately. Its head lifted, ears flared wide, and it committed to a direct charge with no mock display and no intermediate warning phase. Alaric turned back toward the vehicle and reached for the step, but the track surface was loose dust over compacted gravel, and the narrow footstep on the vehicle's side offered almost no grip under sudden body weight and forward momentum. He lost his footing before he could pull himself up. The elephant closed the remaining distance and made full contact, a direct, high-force impact involving the head and tusks, followed by trampling. Surviving something like that is almost impossible, and this time was no different. The ranger sounded the horn and moved the vehicle aggressively toward the elephant. The animal disengaged after a short interval and retreated into the tree line. The injuries sustained were catastrophic and rapidly fatal. Rangers who reviewed the incident confirmed the elephant had displayed every standard indicator of must aggression prior to the charge. The sequence aligned precisely with documented attack patterns in the region: unauthorized exit from the vehicle, proximity breach on foot, and rapid escalation with no intermediate warning phase. No action was taken against the elephant. The reserve filed an internal incident report, reviewed by provincial wildlife authorities. Footage recorded on the vehicle was placed under administrative hold during the formal inquiry and was not made available to the public. No question, this is a hard thing to accept. It's not like Alaric was careless or untrained. He wasn't. He was someone who usually thought things through before acting. But in the end, it shows that knowledge and training don't mean much if you don't take your sources seriously. Alaric spent his career teaching others how to stay alive in hazardous environments, and stepped off a vehicle 55 yards from a must bull because he disagreed with the person telling him not to. The next story involves a woman who calculated her risk deliberately, planned her exit carefully, and still found herself completely isolated in the open, with a predator that had already noticed her before she took a single step. It was September 3, 2017, early morning in the Masai Mara, Kenya. The grass was long and gold in the low light, the air still carrying the cool of overnight. A pride had settled into partial shade at the edge of a scattered tree line, visible from the track, largely still, and already drawing cameras from every passenger on the vehicle. Séraphine Duval, 33, was a French visual content curator on assignment across a series of luxury travel brands. Her professional focus was ground-level, immersive imagery, the kind that looked like it came from inside the environment rather than from a road. Colleagues described her as deliberate and technically skilled, someone who consistently prioritized output quality over caution when the two came into conflict. It seems like it is actually riskier than that. since the act is usually planned. An impulsive person may still back down, but a determined one can hardly be stopped even by herself. The guide positioned the vehicle at an advisable distance from the Pride and stopped the engine. A briefing had been given earlier that morning. No one exits the vehicle under any circumstances. The lions were in partial shade and largely inactive. Several passengers were photographed from their seats. Seraphine assessed her lens compression from inside the vehicle, decided the angle was unworkable for the composition she needed, and waited for the guide's attention to shift. She quietly exited from the vehicle's far side, using the truck as visual cover, crouched low against it, and moved slightly outward to frame a ground-level shot of the resting Pride. A lioness resting apart from the main group had likely already registered her presence through sound and partial movement behind the vehicle. What changed the moment Seraphine cleared the frame was not detection, it was classification. The stimulus shifted from background disturbance to isolated target with no cover and no group association. African lionesses are acutely attuned to movement profiles that match prey behavior. An isolated figure on foot, crouched low and separated from any larger structure, presents a fundamentally different stimulus than a seated passenger inside a vehicle. At close range, a lioness does not rely on sustained speed. She relies on explosive acceleration, covering the first 30 to 40 feet with a force and pace that leaves almost no margin between the moment of commitment and contact. The behavioral threshold that triggers that acceleration is crossed most reliably by sudden standing, turning, and running, a sequence that functions as a near-automatic confirmation of prey status. When Seraphine registered the shift in the lioness's posture and orientation toward her, she stood abruptly and ran. It's easy to judge, but running from a lion up close almost always triggers an attack. It's not just panic, it's instinct. The lioness likely had a second to assess, but the moment she ran, that chance was gone. The lioness covered the distance in seconds. The guide initiated a response, accelerating the vehicle and pressing the horn, but there wasn't enough distance left. Seraphine was brought down before any intervention could reach her. The injuries were catastrophic and rapidly fatal. A post-incident review confirmed the lioness's behavior was consistent with predatory activation, reclassification of an isolated target outside the vehicle, sudden upright movement, and a flight response that completed the trigger sequence. No action was taken against the animal. Seraphine had been carrying a camera and a secondary recording device at the time of the incident. Both were recovered from the scene and submitted to investigators. The footage was retained as part of the formal review and withheld from public release under the authorities' standard policy on graphic wildlife fatality material. What stays with me about this case is how deliberately she planned it. She waited for the right moment, used the vehicle as cover, crouched low. She clearly thought through how to reduce her visibility, and the lioness had likely already registered her presence before she moved a single step. That gap between the control she believed she had and the control she actually had is the most important detail in this entire incident. Planning is not the same as safety. In a place like this, the animal will almost always sense you before you even make your first move. Seraphine planned her exit carefully, and still didn't account for the one variable that made all of her precautions irrelevant. The animal had already seen her. The next story takes a completely different shape. No guide, no group, no briefing to dismiss. Just a man alone on a self-drive permit, a gravel road, and a white rhinoceros he decided to approach on foot for a better photograph. It was January 22nd, 2014, mid-morning in Kruger National Park. The secondary gravel road was quiet, no other vehicles in either direction, flat terrain with good visibility, and scattered bush pulling back from the road edge in patches of pale grass. The kind of conditions that feel controlled because nothing is moving. Thaddeus Creel, 53, was an Afrikaner scrap metal dealer from Pretoria. He had visited Kruger multiple times on self-drive permits and was familiar enough with the routine to know exactly which regulations he was bypassing. Earlier that morning, he had moved past a posted speed advisory without adjusting and waved off a slower vehicle that had stopped to observe a distant herd. People who knew him described a man who treated most rules as negotiable, in business, in daily life, and apparently in national parks. There's a kind of risk-taker that's more dangerous than someone just being careless. Thaddeus wasn't clueless. His experience made him overconfident. He'd done it before without any problems, and that kind of success can make caution taken for granted. He stopped along a secondary gravel road after spotting a white rhinoceros grazing roughly 200 feet off the road edge. No other vehicles were present. He exited the car and left the door open, then gradually advanced, closing the gap to well under 100 feet to improve his camera angle. The rhino lifted its head and oriented its body directly toward him. That posture, head raised, body squared, weight shifted forward, is a documented pre-charge indicator in white rhinoceros behavior. Thaddeus stayed still in his position and attempted to take another photograph. White rhinoceros are the largest land animals after elephants, with adult males weighing between 3,500 and 5,000 pounds. Despite their mass, they reach 30 to 35 miles per hour within a few strides. Their eyesight is poor, but their hearing and sense of smell are acute. A rhino that has already squared its body toward a perceived threat at close range has effectively entered the charge sequence. There was no extended bluff phase. If there was any hesitation in the animal's transition, it was too brief to register as a warning. The rhino charged. Thaddeus rushed toward his vehicle, but sadly covered the distance too slowly. The animal closed the gap almost immediately. The impact and horn contact came within the same instant, the force of the collision driving him to the ground before he could reach the door. He did not make it back to the vehicle. The injuries were catastrophic and rapidly fatal. Rangers said the scenario matched with multiple documented fatalities in the park: solo self-drive, unauthorized exit, gradual distance reduction, and a delayed retreat after a clear warning posture. No action was taken against the animal. The incident was logged in a visitor safety report filed with park management. Thaddeus had a phone with him at the time. Whether footage was captured was not confirmed publicly, and no material was released. The open car door matters. Leaving it a bit open shows he only meant to step out for a moment, and he had a plan to come back immediately. But even when he had the chance, he didn't take it. Being familiar with the park didn't give him an advantage. It just made him feel too comfortable and forget to be cautious. Thaddeus ignored a direct warning posture and lost the only margin he had. The next story moves away from solo decisions and into a group setting, a guided walking safari in the Okavango Delta, where one man's impatience with his sightline pulled him out of formation at exactly the wrong moment. It was November 11, 2016, mid-morning in the Okavango Delta, Botswana. The bush was dense in stretches along the trail, broken by open patches where the tree cover thinned. A dry, windless morning, the kind of conditions that carry sound well but also allow animals to hold position in thick cover without detection until the gap has already closed. Leopards in this terrain are rarely spotted before they choose to be. Kalen Irie, 31, was a Japanese-American startup founder used to moving fast and making decisions quickly. By most accounts, he was highly capable in environments he controlled and visibly impatient in ones he didn't. He had joined a professionally guided walking safari, an activity that is almost entirely about discipline, spacing, and deference to the person leading. When a controlling person faces a situation they can't control, things usually go the same way. It's not anger or impulse. He just didn't want to be told what to do. He couldn't accept that others might know better. And in the bush, that kind of mindset comes at a cost. Before departure, the guide gave clear and direct instructions to maintain single-file formation, no sudden movements, and not break line under any circumstances, regardless of what was spotted. He even emphasized the last point. The group moved across the open ground at a steady pace. The guide is in front, and everyone else is close and monitored behind in a tight line. Midway through the walk, the guide raised his fist and brought the group to a complete stop. He had picked up fresh signs along the trail edge: recently disturbed vegetation, a drag mark in the soft soil, and a faint but distinct musk that experienced guides in the region associate with a leopard holding close to cover. He kept the group stationary and began scanning the dense thicket running parallel to the trail, roughly 20 to 30 feet off the line. Kalen, positioned mid-file, could not see past the person directly ahead. Without saying anything or waiting, he stepped off to the side to get a better angle into the brush. African leopards are solitary ambush predators that rely almost entirely on concealment and proximity before committing to a strike. Adult males weigh between 130 and 200 pounds and are capable of reaching 36 miles per hour over short distances. Unlike lions or buffalo, a leopard does not build toward a charge. It closes distance from a stationary concealed position in a single explosive burst, targeting the back of the neck or throat with precision. A leopard that has already selected a position within striking range of a moving group does not need to reposition. It only needs the target to step close enough. Kalen's lateral step moved him off the trail and directly toward the thicket edge. The guide registered the movement and turned immediately, issuing a sharp, low instruction to step back into line. Kalen had not yet complied. The leopard, concealed in the dense brush within roughly 20 feet of where he now stood, launched from its position without any intermediate display. The strike was low and direct, targeting the back of the neck and shoulder in a single committed motion. The contact brought him to the ground at the thicket edge. The guide moved forward immediately and discharged a deterrent. The leopard disengaged and retreated deep into the brush. Kalen was conscious but non-responsive in the immediate aftermath, with severe trauma to the neck and shoulder region. His condition deteriorated rapidly over the following minutes as the group worked to stabilize him, and the guide radioed for emergency response. He lost consciousness before assistance reached the group's position. The injuries were catastrophic, and he was pronounced dead shortly after evacuation teams arrived on scene. Post-incident findings confirmed the leopard had been holding a concealed position parallel to the trail before the group arrived, placing it within strike range the moment Kalen cleared the formation line. No prior aggressive display had been observed. The animal's response was consistent with a proximity-triggered strike from concealment. No action was taken against the leopard. The guide filed an incident report with local wildlife authorities. No footage was captured during the attack, and no material was submitted for review. Honestly, it's hard to call this an obvious mistake. Kalen had just been told what not to do seconds before it happened. He only shifted a little to the side, not leaving the group, not moving toward the animal, just trying to see better. But that small move put him within range. It looks like nothing, and that's exactly what makes it so hard to understand. Kalen stepped out of formation for a better angle and closed the distance the leopard had been waiting to preserve. The next story moves to water, specifically to dusk along the Luangwa River in Zambia, where a woman set up a shot along the bank without realizing she had positioned herself directly across the one path a hippopotamus needed to reach the water. It was April 27, 2018, at dusk along the Luangwa River in Zambia. The light was dropping fast, the river surface shifting between orange and flat gray as the sun pulled below the tree line. The bank vegetation threw long shadows across the waterline, and the air carried the heavy, wet smell of the river at low tide. Dusk along the Luangwa is not a neutral time. It is specifically the window when hippopotamuses transition between their daytime positions in the water and their nocturnal grazing corridors on land. Isolda Navarro, 35, was a Spanish documentary stringer who had built her career working independently across southern Africa. She had some field experience and a basic understanding of the environments she worked in. What defined her professional pattern was a consistent preference for autonomy. No local guides, her own schedule, her own location calls. Honestly, this kind of situation leaves no time to correct a bad decision. It just continues. And that really matters out in the bush. Lodge staff had spoken to her directly before she left the property. The warning was not general, it was specific. Hippos were actively using the grazing corridor in the section of bank she intended to film, and she was advised not to approach the waterline after late afternoon. She heard the warning, but she went ahead without acknowledging. She moved along the bank at dusk with her camera gear and crouched on a narrow strip between the grass line and the water's edge, adjusting her exposure settings in the failing light. What she had not identified was the access path directly behind her, a worn, vegetation-flattened corridor running from the water's edge up into the bank grass, marked clearly by compressed soil and pushed-down reeds. She was positioned directly across it. A large hippopotamus was already partially submerged nearby, eyes and ears at the surface. At that stage, the animal had likely already been tracking her position along the bank before making any visible movement toward emergence. Common hippopotamuses are the third largest land animal on Earth, with adult males weighing between 3,000 and 4,000 pounds. On land, they reach speeds of 19 to 21 miles per hour over short distances. Their aggression in these situations is path-clearing behavior, a committed immediate charge directed at removing whatever is blocking access between water and land. There is no extended warning display and no escalating vocalization. Once the animal commits, it does not stop until the path is clear. The hippo began its emergence already oriented toward her position. The charge was underway almost as it fully cleared the waterline. Not a reaction that built from stillness, but one that had likely already resolved before she registered any movement. Even if she had reacted at that very moment, it was already too late. The uneven bank offered no footing. Wet soil, low vegetation behind her, and the worn corridor at her back left nowhere to move. The hippo reached her within seconds, delivering crushing contact at close-range speed. The injuries were non-survivable. Recovery teams did not reach her immediately. Hippos remained active along that section of bank well into the night, and teams held their position until conditions allowed safe access. She was recovered after dark. A post-incident review confirmed her positioning across an active transit corridor during peak movement hours was the sole trigger. No action was taken against the animal. Lodge staff confirmed the warning had been given directly before she left the property. No footage was recovered from the scene, and no usable material was retrieved from her equipment. Beforehand, the warning gave clear, specific details about how the animals were behaving right then. That kind of information is more important than achieving the bigger picture. She was already advised what she needed to act and do, but sadly she didn't listen. Isolde had the warning and proceeded anyway. The next story moves onto the water entirely, a licensed boat safari along the Chobe River in Botswana, where a photographer leaned over the bow to reduce glare on his lens, and a Nile crocodile that had been tracking the hull resolved the situation before anyone on the boat had time to react. It was August 19, 2013, mid-afternoon on the Chobe River in Botswana. The dry season had pulled the water level down, exposing long stretches of pale sandbank along both sides of the channel. Several of those banks held basking crocodiles visible from the boat, motionless, low against the sand, their outlines easy to dismiss as debris until the light caught them correctly. The river surface itself was flat and reflective, the kind of midday glare that collapses contrast and pulls photographers toward the water's edge looking for a cleaner angle. Still water on the Chobe is not empty water. It rarely is. Evren Halvorsen, 40, was a Norwegian freelance wildlife photographer with a portfolio built around technically precise, publication-ready field imagery. He had joined a small licensed boat safari operating along the Chobe, a structured tour with a guide, a defined route, and a specific set of rules communicated before the boat left the dock. Passengers were told to stay seated while the vessel was moving, keep all limbs and equipment inside the hull at all times, and follow guide instructions immediately and without discussion. The guide had delivered those rules with a tone that made clear they were not suggestions. Crocodiles and hippopotamuses had already been observed in the channel during the morning session. By most accounts, Evren was methodical and composed in the field. What colleagues noted was a consistent pattern of treating compositional quality as the primary variable, the fixed point that everything else, including instruction, rotated around when the two came into conflict. Honestly, it is noted that the more skilled someone is with a camera, the harder it is to let a shot go. To them, rules do not disappear. They just get ignored when the shot looks right, and they do not want to miss it. The guide had already redirected Evren once earlier in the trip for extending his camera too far over the rail during a low pass near a sandbank. He had complied and repositioned. The correction didn't change how he was thinking. It only stopped what he was doing at that moment. As the boat moved through a quieter section of the channel, the surface glare intensified. Evren repositioned at the bow and leaned his upper body beyond the rail, dropping his camera toward the waterline to cut the reflection angle. His torso cleared the edge of the hull, with his face and hands close to the surface. The guide called him out immediately, but Evren consciously ignored the warning. Nile crocodiles are ambush predators that operate almost entirely on patience and positioning. Adult males reach lengths of 14 to 17 feet and weigh between 500 and 1,100 pounds. Their strike is vertical and explosive, a full-body lunge generated from below the surface with no visible warning break before contact. A crocodile does not need to be stationary to remain undetected. It can hold position or move slowly along a hull beneath the waterline without surfacing. Once contact is made, the animal immediately initiates a lateral roll, a rapid, full-body rotation designed to disorient, submerge, and immobilize. Survival after entering the water during an active roll sequence is extraordinarily unlikely. The crocodile was likely already positioned beneath or tracking along the hull before the moment of contact. The strike came the instant Evren's hands and shoulder cleared the rail and dropped close to the waterline. The lunge was vertical and immediate, clamping onto his shoulder and upper arm before pulling him over the rail in a single continuous motion. There was no visible approach, no warning break in the surface. The contact and the submersion happened within the same second. The crew responded immediately, shouting, striking the water, attempting to locate the point of submersion. The crocodile had already initiated the roll and pulled him under within moments of contact. The turbulence subsided quickly. The river surface settled. Despite the crew's attempts to track the location, the depth and current of the channel made immediate recovery impossible. The boat was moved to the bank and authorities were contacted. Evren's remains were recovered downstream several days later. The incident was reviewed by wildlife authorities and classified as a textbook crocodile ambush. Low body positioning over open water, extension beyond the vessel boundary, and proximity to an animal already within strike range. No action was taken against the crocodile. The licensed operator was subject to a compliance review. A secondary camera mounted at the bow captured partial footage of the moment of contact. The footage was submitted to investigators and withheld from public release, later referenced in field safety training materials used by boat safari operators in the region. What stands out is how simple the boundary was. It wasn't about terrain or distance. It was just a rail with a clear rule not to cross it. The light on the water turned into a problem he wanted to fix, and that made him ignore the guide's rule from the start. It wasn't the crocodile that changed things. It was the way he leaned past that line.